She appeared in my doorway at midnight with tears in her eyes and a secret that would change everything. I thought our story was over. I was wrong. Michael was sitting at his desk that night just like any other Tuesday. The clock on his computer screen showed 11:15 p.m. He had been divorced for 3 years now, living in this small apartment on the 4th floor of an old building downtown. The place wasn't much, just 2 bedrooms, a tiny kitchen, and a living room that barely fit his couch. But it was his, and he had grown used to the silence. He was working on a presentation for his job, something about quarterly sales numbers that his boss needed by morning. His eyes were getting tired from staring at the bright screen in the dark room. The only light came from his laptop and a small desk lamp that threw long shadows across the walls. Outside he could hear the occasional car passing by, but mostly everything was quiet. That's how he liked it these days. Quiet. Predictable. Safe. Michael had locked the door when he came home from work, just like he always did. He had this routine, Come home, lock the door, check it twice to make sure it's really locked, then settle in for the evening. Sometimes he'd make dinner. Sometimes he'd just eat whatever was left over from the day before. Tonight it had been a sandwich and some chips. Nothing fancy. He wasn't trying to impress anyone anymore. Then he heard something, just the smallest sound, like someone stepping on a creaky floorboard in the hallway. His fingers stopped moving on the keyboard. He held his breath, listening. His apartment building was old, and sometimes the wood floors made noise when the temperature changed at night. But this sound was different. This was the sound of weight, of someone actually standing there. The door to his bedroom started to open, slowly. So slowly that at first he thought maybe he was imagining it. But no, the door was definitely moving. His heart started pounding so hard he could feel it in his throat. For a second he couldn't move, couldn't think, couldn't do anything except watch that door swing open inch by inch. And then she was there, standing in his doorway. His ex-wife, Jennifer. The hallway light behind her made her look almost like a shadow, but he knew that silhouette anywhere. He had been married to this woman for 8 years. He knew the way she stood, the way she held her shoulders, the curve of her profile. Michael's heart didn't just skip a beat. It completely stopped for what felt like forever. Then it started again, hammering against his ribs like it was trying to break free. He couldn't breathe properly. His mouth went dry. All he could do was stare at her, standing there in his doorway like a ghost from his past. She didn't say anything at first. Neither did he. They just looked at each other across the small room, and all the history between them seemed to fill up the space. All the good times, all the fights, all the tears, all the paperwork, all the lawyers, all the silence that had come after. Jennifer was wearing this old gray sweater he recognized. He had bought it for her years ago when they took a trip to Scotland. They had been happy then, walking through the Highlands, holding hands, talking about their future. That sweater was worn now, faded, with a small hole near the bottom that she had never bothered to fix. She always said it was too comfortable to throw away. Her face looked different than he remembered. Thinner, paler. There were dark circles under her eyes that hadn't been there before. Her hair was shorter too, cut in a simple style that didn't quite suit her. But what really got to him were her eyes. They looked lost, scared. Like she had been wandering in the dark for a long time and had finally found a light, but wasn't sure if she should trust it. Michael realized his hands were shaking. He slowly stood up from his chair, and it made this loud scraping sound against the floor that seemed way too loud in the silence. She flinched a little at the noise, but didn't step back. Didn't leave. Just stood there looking at him with those scared, tired eyes. He opened his mouth to say something, but nothing came out. What do you say to someone you haven't spoken to in 18 months? Someone who broke your heart? Someone whose heart you broke right back? Someone who was supposed to be out of your life forever, but who was now standing in your bedroom at 11:15 on a Tuesday night. Jennifer's hands were trembling at her sides. He could see them shaking even from across the room. She took a breath like she was about to say something, but then stopped. Her lips pressed together and he saw her eyes getting wet with tears. That's when Michael realized something was really wrong. This wasn't about getting back together. This wasn't about wanting to talk about old times. This wasn't about closure or any of that stuff. Something bad had happened. Something really, really bad. He took a step toward her, and that seemed to break whatever spell was holding her frozen. Her shoulders started shaking. A tear ran down her cheek. Then another. And then she just started crying right there in his doorway, these quiet, broken sobs that made his chest hurt. Michael didn't think. He just moved. He crossed the room in 3 steps and caught her as her knees started to give out. She collapsed against him, her face pressed into his shoulder, crying like her heart was breaking all over again. He held her, his arms wrapping around her automatically like his body remembered what to do even though his mind was still trying to catch up. She smelled the same. That's what hit him. After all this time, after everything, she still used the same shampoo, the same soap. It brought back a flood of memories so strong he had to close his eyes against them. Lazy Sunday mornings, dancing in the kitchen, laughing until they couldn't breathe, fighting until they couldn't stand. And finally the end, the terrible, quiet end. They stood there for a long time. Michael didn't know how long. Could have been minutes. Could have been an hour. Time seemed to have stopped completely. He held her while she cried, and he didn't ask any questions. Didn't demand explanations. Didn't push her away. He just held her, like he used to do all those years ago when the world got too heavy for her to carry alone. Eventually, her crying slowed down. She took these shaky, hitching breaths, trying to pull herself together. She pulled back a little, wiping her eyes with the sleeve of that old gray sweater. She wouldn't look at him, just stared at the floor between them. Michael's mind was racing. How did she get in? Then he remembered the key. She still had a key. He had never asked for it back after the divorce. It had seemed too petty, too final. He had just changed his address and moved on. Or tried to. But she had kept her key to his old place. And when he had moved to this building 2 years ago, he had been too tired to care about getting new locks. The landlord had just given him the same keys the previous tenant had used. She must have known he lived here. Must have been keeping track somehow. The thought should have scared him, maybe. Should have made him angry. But it didn't, it just made him sad. Sad that she had known where he was but hadn't reached out. Sad that she had been carrying around his key for 3 years like she couldn't quite let go either. Jennifer finally looked up at him. Her eyes were red and swollen from crying, but there was something else in them now. Fear. Real, deep fear. The kind that makes your blood run cold. "I need to tell you something," she said, and her voice was so quiet he almost didn't hear it. Michael nodded. He was afraid to speak. Afraid that if he said the wrong thing, she would leave and he would never know what had brought her here. Never know why she had walked into his room silently on a Tuesday night and made his heart stop. They moved to the kitchen. Michael didn't really decide to do this, it just seemed like the right thing. The bedroom felt too personal, too intimate. The kitchen was neutral ground. He filled the kettle with water and put it on the stove. His grandmother had always said the tea made everything better, and right now he would take any comfort he could get. Jennifer sat down at his small kitchen table. It was the same table they had bought together from a flea market downtown, back when they were first married and had no money for real furniture. They had spent a whole Saturday sanding it down and refinishing it, had argued about what color to paint it. She had wanted white. He had wanted natural wood. They had compromised on a light gray that made them both happy. Seeing her sitting there now at their table, in his apartment, felt like stepping into a dream. Or maybe a nightmare. He wasn't sure which yet. The kettle started whistling. Michael made 2 cups of tea, adding honey to hers the way she liked it. He hadn't bought honey in 3 years. Didn't even like the stuff himself. But last week he had been at the grocery store and had found himself standing in front of the honey display, and his hand had just reached out and grabbed a jar. He had told himself it was for guests. But he never had guests. He had bought it for her, even though he didn't know it at the time. Even though there was no reason to think he would ever see her again. He sat down across from her and pushed the cup toward her. She wrapped her hands around it like she was cold. It was summer. The apartment was warm, but she was shivering anyway. "I've been sick," she said finally, just like that. No build-up, no warning. "I have cancer." Michael felt the world tilt. The kitchen seemed to spin around him. He gripped the edge of the table to steady himself. Cancer. The word echoed in his head, bouncing around like a pinball, hitting every fear and memory and nightmare he had ever had. "What?" he managed to say. His voice didn't sound like his own. "I was diagnosed 6 months ago," Jennifer continued. She was staring at her tea, watching the steam rise from it. "Stage 3. They found it during a routine checkup. I had been feeling tired, But I thought it was just stress from work. From everything. She gestured vaguely, and he knew she meant the divorce. The aftermath. The rebuilding, 6 months. She had known for 6 months and hadn't told him. Michael felt anger starting to bubble up in his chest, hot and sharp. But then he looked at her face, at how thin and worn she looked, and the anger dissolved into something else. Guilt, maybe, or sorrow, or both. "Why didn't you call me?" he asked. She laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. It was bitter and sad. "Why would I? We're divorced, Michael. You made it pretty clear you wanted nothing to do with me." "That's not fair," he said, but his voice was weak. Because maybe it was fair. Maybe he had made it clear. Maybe they had both made it clear. "I had surgery," she continued, like she hadn't heard him. "They removed what they could. Then I started chemotherapy. Do you know what chemotherapy is like? It's poison. They pump poison into your veins and hope it kills the cancer before it kills you. I lost all my hair. Lost 20 pounds. Spent days just lying in bed, too sick to move, too tired to care." Michael's hands were clenched so tight his knuckles were white. He wanted to interrupt, wanted to say something, but he couldn't find the words. "I did it all alone," Jennifer said, and now tears were sliding down her face again. "My parents are dead. My sister lives in Australia. I pushed away all our friends during the divorce because I didn't want to make them choose sides. So it was just me and the doctors and the nurses and the waiting rooms and the fear. Jennifer, I'm not finished," she said, and her voice got stronger. "I need to say this. I need you to understand. I convinced myself that I deserved it. That I deserved to go through this alone. Because of how I treated you. Because of the affair, there it was. The thing they never talked about. The reason their marriage had ended. She had cheated on him with someone from her office. It had only lasted a few months before she had ended it and confessed everything. But by then the damage was done. Michael had tried to forgive her. Had really, truly tried. But every time he looked at her, he saw betrayal. And she saw his pain, and neither of them could fix it. "You didn't deserve this," Michael said firmly. "No one deserves cancer." "Maybe," she said. "But I thought I did. So I didn't tell anyone. Didn't ask for help. Just put my head down and tried to get through it. The doctor said I was doing well. The tumors were shrinking. The treatment was working. I started to think maybe I would actually survive this thing." She paused, took a shaky breath, and Michael knew the worst was coming. "But then I got my results today," she said. "New scans. They found more. The cancer has spread. It's in my lymph nodes now. They want to try a more aggressive treatment, but they can't promise it will work." Her voice broke on the last word. Michael stood up so fast his chair fell over backward with a loud crash. He didn't pick it up. He moved around the table and knelt beside her chair, taking her hands in his. They were so cold. How had he not noticed how cold her hands were? "Listen to me," he said, looking up at her face. "You're not doing this alone anymore. Do you understand? I don't care what happened between us. I don't care about the past. You're not alone. Michael, you don't have to." "Yes, I do," he said. "Maybe I don't have to, but I want to. I need to. Please, let me help you." Jennifer looked down at him and something in her face crumbled. All the strength she had been holding on to, all the walls she had built up, they just fell away. She slid off the chair and onto the floor beside him, and they held each other on the cold kitchen tiles while she cried, and he whispered promises he hoped he could keep. The sun came up eventually, like it always does. Michael and Jennifer had talked all night, sitting at that old table, drinking cup after cup of tea until they both felt sick from too much caffeine. They talked about things they should have talked about years ago. The mistakes they made, the hurt they caused each other, the love that got buried under anger and pride. Jennifer told him about the chemotherapy sessions, how she would sit in a room full of strangers, all of them connected to IV bags, all of them fighting their own private battles. She talked about losing her hair and how she had cried the first time she looked in the mirror and didn't recognize herself. About the nausea that made her unable to eat for days. About the fear that woke her up at 3 a.m, making her heart race and her palms sweat. Michael listened to all of it. Every painful detail. He didn't interrupt. Didn't try to fix it or make it better. Just listened, which was something he had never been good at during their marriage. He had always wanted to solve problems, to take action. But sometimes people don't need solutions. Sometimes they just need someone to hear them. When the sky started turning pink with dawn, Michael told Jennifer about his life after the divorce. How he had thrown himself into work, staying late at the office every night just so he wouldn't have to come home to an empty apartment. How he had tried dating a few times but couldn't connect with anyone because he was still stuck in the past. How he had been lonely in a way he didn't know how to fix. "I thought you had moved on," Jennifer admitted. "I saw you once about a year ago. You were walking down the street with a woman. You were laughing at something she said. You looked happy. I turned around and went the other way before you could see me." "That was my colleague Amy," Michael said. "She was showing me pictures of her new puppy. Her husband had just surprised her with it. I wasn't dating her. I wasn't dating anyone. I couldn't. Why not?" Michael looked at her, really looked at her in the growing daylight. "Because I wasn't over you. I don't think I ever was." The words hung in the air between them. Heavy, true, scary. Jennifer reached across the table and took his hand. Her grip was weak, but it was there. "I kept your key," she said. "I told myself it was because I kept forgetting to mail it back to you. But that wasn't true. I kept it because letting go of that key meant letting go of you, and I couldn't do it." "I'm glad you kept it," Michael said. "I'm glad you used it. I'm glad you came here. Even though I showed up in the middle of the night like some kind of crazy person?" "Especially because of that," he said. And for the first time in hours, they both smiled. Just a little. Just enough. As the morning got brighter, Michael made a decision. He pulled out his phone and sent an email to his boss. He wasn't coming to work today. The presentation would have to wait. Everything would have to wait. He had something more important to do. "What was that?" Jennifer asked. "I'm taking the day off," he said. "We're going to your next doctor's appointment together." "When is it?" "Michael, you don't need to. When is it?" He repeated, "Tomorrow afternoon. But really, you don't have to come. I've been managing fine on my own." "That stops now," he said firmly. "You're not managing alone anymore." "What time tomorrow?" 2:00. At the cancer center downtown. "I'll pick you up at 1:30, he said. "And I'm going to every appointment from now on. Every single one. I don't care if it's just a checkup or a blood test. I'm going to be there." Jennifer started crying again, but these tears were different. They weren't tears of fear or pain. They were tears of relief, of gratitude, of not having to be strong all by herself anymore. Over the next few weeks, Michael completely reorganized his life. He talked to his boss and arranged to work from home 3 days a week. He researched cancer treatment centers and doctors. He read medical journals and articles until his eyes hurt. He learned words like lymphatic system and metastasis and white blood cell count, words he never wanted to know but needed to understand. He went with Jennifer to every appointment, sat with her in waiting rooms, held her hand during consultations, took notes when the doctors explained treatment options, asked questions when she was too overwhelmed to think straight. He became her advocate, her support system, her partner in this fight. The chemotherapy sessions were the hardest. They would arrive at the cancer center early in the morning. Jennifer would check in, and they would be led to a large room filled with recliners. Other patients would be there, some with family members, some alone. Jennifer would settle into a chair, and a nurse would come to insert the IV. Michael learned to bring things to make the time pass. Books, magazines, her favorite snacks for afterward, even though she usually felt too sick to eat them. He would sit beside her for hours while the poison dripped into her veins, trying to kill the cancer cells without destroying too much else. Jennifer would often feel sick during the treatments. Michael learned to recognize the signs, the way her face would turn pale, how she would grip the armrests of the chair. He would get the nurse, who would adjust the medication or give her something for the nausea. Then he would hold her hand and talk to her about anything and everything, memories from their marriage, funny stories from work, plans for the future, even though they both knew the future was uncertain. Slowly, Jennifer's friends started coming back. People she had pushed away during the divorce began to reach out. Michael called them, explained what was happening, and organized a support network. There was a schedule for meals. People signed up to drive her to appointments when Michael couldn't. Friends visited, bringing flowers and gossip and normalcy. Jennifer's apartment became a place of life again instead of a place where she just waited to die. There were always fresh flowers on her table. Cards covered her refrigerator. People texted her constantly, checking in, sending love, refusing to let her disappear. And through it all, Michael was there. Every day, every crisis, Every small victory. When her hair started growing back in soft, fuzzy patches, he told her she looked beautiful. When she couldn't keep food down for 3 days straight, he sat with her and brought her ice chips. When she broke down crying because she was so tired of being sick, he held her and let her be angry and scared and human. Their relationship began to change. They weren't married anymore. They weren't exactly dating, but they were something. They were two people who had been through hell separately and had decided to face the next hell together. They were honest in ways they had never been before. Vulnerable. Real. Jennifer told him one day that having cancer was the worst and best thing that had ever happened to her. The worst for obvious reasons. The best because it had brought him back to her. Because it had forced her to stop being proud and ask for help. Because it had shown her what really mattered. Michael understood what she meant. He wouldn't have wished this on her for anything in the world. But he was grateful for the chance to be there. To make up for the ways he had failed her during their marriage. To show her that love wasn't just about the easy times. It was about standing together when everything fell apart. 14 months. That's how long it took. 14 months of treatments and tests and hoping and fearing. 14 months of good days and bad days and days that were somewhere in between. 14 months of learning what it really meant to fight for something. Michael had stopped counting how many appointments they had been to. How many times Jennifer had felt sick. How many nights he had stayed over at her apartment because she was too weak to be alone. His own apartment had become just a place to keep his clothes. All his time, all his energy, all his focus was on her. His co-workers had been understanding at first, then concerned, then quietly judgmental. His boss had pulled him aside one day and asked if he was okay, if he needed to take a leave of absence. Michael had said no. He was fine. He could handle both work and this. But the truth was he was exhausted, running on coffee and determination and the fear of what would happen if he stopped. Jennifer noticed. Of course she noticed. One evening, about 9 months into her treatment, she had sat him down in her living room and told him he needed to take care of himself too. "You look terrible," she had said bluntly. "Thanks," he had replied with a weak smile. "I'm serious, Michael. You've lost weight. You have dark circles under your eyes. When was the last time you did something for yourself? Something that wasn't related to me or my cancer?" He had tried to protest, but she cut him off. "I appreciate everything you're doing, more than you know, but I can't watch you destroy yourself trying to save me. Promise me you'll take better care of yourself, please." So he had started trying, going to the gym a few times a week, meeting up with his own friends occasionally, taking walks in the park. Small things, but they helped. They reminded him that life existed outside of hospitals and treatment plans, that there was still beauty in the world even when things were hard. The treatment was brutal. The second round of chemotherapy was more aggressive than the first. Jennifer's body struggled to handle it. There were complications, infections that landed her in the hospital. Days when she was so weak she couldn't get out of bed. Moments when Michael wondered if they were doing the right thing, or if they were just prolonging the suffering. But Jennifer never gave up. Even on the worst days, she kept fighting. She said she had too much to live for now, too many reasons to keep going. And every time Michael looked at her, he saw the strength that had first made him fall in love with her all those years ago. The determination, the fire. They also talked about their marriage. Really talked about it, in ways they never had before. Jennifer apologized again for the affair, but this time Michael was ready to really hear it. Really forgive it. Not just say the words, but mean them deep in his heart. "I was selfish," she said one night. "I was unhappy. And instead of talking to you about it, instead of working on us, I looked for an escape. It was wrong. It was cowardly. And I'm sorry." "I forgive you," Michael said, and he meant it. "And I'm sorry too. For shutting you out after. For not fighting for us. For giving up." "We both gave up," Jennifer said. "But maybe that's okay. Maybe we needed to lose each other to understand what we had." They started going to therapy together. Not couples therapy exactly, since they weren't technically a couple, but therapy to deal with the trauma of the cancer, the fear, the uncertainty, the strange situation they found themselves in, not quite married but not quite separate either. The therapist helped them understand that they were grieving. Not just the possibility of Jennifer's death, but the loss of their marriage, the life they had planned together, the future they thought they would have. And in that grieving, they were finding something new, something unexpected. Around the 1-year mark, something shifted. Jennifer started feeling better. The treatments were still hard, but she was tolerating them more. The scans started showing improvement. The doctors began using words like promising and encouraging. They didn't say remission yet. That was still too far away. But there was hope, real tangible hope. Michael watched Jennifer transform. Her strength came back. Her smile returned. She started making plans again, thinking about the future in concrete ways instead of vague possibilities. She talked about going back to work, about traveling, about all the things she wanted to do if she got the chance. They celebrated the small victories. Every clean scan, every treatment cycle completed. Every day she felt well enough to leave the house. They went to movies, had dinners at restaurants, walked through the botanical gardens, lived as normally as they could, and somewhere in all of that they fell in love again. Or maybe they had never really fallen out of love. Maybe the love had just been buried under hurt and anger and pride. But now it was back, stronger than before, deeper, more real, but they were careful. They didn't rush into anything, didn't make big declarations or promises they might not be able to keep. They just took it day by day, enjoying what they had, not worrying too much about what came next. Jennifer's friends teased her about it, asked when they were getting back together officially. She would just smile and say they were figuring it out, that there was no rush, that they were right where they needed to be. Michael's friends were more skeptical. They worried he was setting himself up to get hurt again, reminded him of the affair, of how hard the divorce had been. But Michael didn't care. This was his life, his choice, his heart, and he was finally listening to it instead of his fear. The doctor's appointments became routine. Every 3 months, Jennifer would go in for scans. They would wait anxiously for the results, holding hands in the waiting room, trying not to think about worst-case scenarios. And every 3 months, the news got a little better. The tumors continued to shrink. The cancer markers in her blood kept dropping. Her body was healing. Slowly, painfully, but healing nonetheless. The doctors started talking about finishing treatment, about maintenance plans, about monitoring instead of actively fighting. It felt like learning to breathe again after being underwater for too long. The day they got the news, it was raining. Michael remembered that detail clearly. It was pouring outside, one of those summer storms that come out of nowhere and turn the world gray and wet. They sat in the oncologist's office, both of them tense, waiting for the doctor to come in with the latest scan results. Jennifer was squeezing his hand so hard it hurt, but Michael didn't say anything. He just squeezed back, trying to transfer some of his strength to her. They had been through this so many times now. The waiting, the hoping, the fear that this time the news would be bad. The door opened and Dr. Chen walked in with a folder in her hands. She was smiling. That was the first clue. Dr. Chen wasn't usually a smiler. She was professional, kind, but serious. Seeing her smile made Michael's heart start to race. "I have good news," Dr. Chen said, and those 4 words changed everything. The scans were clear. Completely clear. No evidence of disease. The cancer was gone. Jennifer was in remission. For a moment, neither of them could process it. They just sat there staring at the doctor, waiting for the catch, because there had to be a catch, right? Nothing this good could just happen. Not after everything they had been through. But there was no catch. The cancer was really gone. Jennifer would need to come back for regular checkups, would need to be monitored. There was always a chance it could come back. But for now, right now, she was cancer-free. Jennifer started crying. Michael started crying. They held each other in that doctor's office and sobbed with relief and joy and disbelief. Dr. Chen quietly left the room to give them privacy, and they just stayed there holding on to each other, letting the reality sink in. They were going to be okay. They were going to have a future. The ride home was quiet. Neither of them knew what to say. The rain had stopped, and sun was breaking through the clouds, making everything sparkle. It felt symbolic, like the universe was celebrating with them. When they got to Jennifer's apartment, Michael parked the car but didn't get out. They sat there in silence for a while, both lost in their own thoughts. "I can't believe it's over," Jennifer finally said. "It's not over," Michael replied. "You'll still need checkups. We'll still need to be careful. I know, but the worst is over. The fighting is over. I get to live, Michael. I actually get to live." She turned to look at him and her eyes were shining with tears and hope and something else. Something that made Michael's breath catch in his throat. "Thank you," she whispered. "For everything. For showing up. For staying. For not giving up on me even when I had given up on myself." "You never gave up," Michael said. "You fought harder than anyone I've ever known. You're the strongest person I've ever met." They got out of the car and walked up to her apartment. Jennifer wanted to call everyone, share the good news. Her sister in Australia, her friends, her co-workers. She was buzzing with energy, the relief and joy making her almost giddy. Michael watched her make call after call, watched her smile and laugh and cry happy tears. And he realized something. He didn't want to go back to his apartment tonight. Didn't want to leave her. Didn't want to be anywhere but here. Over the next few weeks, they started talking about the future in real terms. Not just hoping for a future, but planning one. Jennifer wanted to travel. There were so many places she had always wanted to see but had been too busy or too scared or too sick. Now she had a second chance and she wasn't going to waste it. Michael wanted to travel too. But more than that, he wanted to be with her. Wherever she went, whatever she did, he wanted to be part of it. One evening, about a month after the good news, they were having dinner at Jennifer's place. Nothing fancy, just pasta and salad and wine. They were talking about maybe taking a trip to Italy in the fall. Jennifer was excited, making lists of all the places she wanted to see. Then she stopped suddenly and looked at Michael across the table. "What are we doing?" she asked. "What do you mean?" "I mean us. What are we? We're not married anymore. We're not exactly dating. We're just existing together. And I'm grateful for it. But I need to know. What do you want?" Michael put down his fork. This was the conversation they had been avoiding. The one that would force them to define what they were, what they wanted to be. "I want you," he said simply. "I want us. I want to try again. For real this time. Even after everything. After how badly we messed it up the first time. Especially after everything," Michael said. "We're not the same people we were. We've both changed. We've grown. We've learned. I think we could do it right this time." Jennifer was quiet for a long moment. Then she smiled. That beautiful smile he had fallen in love with so many years ago. "I want that too," she said. They started dating. Really dating. Going to movies, having dinners out, spending weekends together. It felt strange at first, trying to rebuild a relationship with someone who knew all your worst habits and biggest flaws. But it also felt right, natural, like coming home after a long journey. They took things slow, didn't rush, didn't try to force anything, just let things develop at their own pace. They went to couples therapy to work through their old issues and make sure they didn't fall into the same patterns that had destroyed their marriage the first time. Michael learned to communicate better, to express his feelings instead of bottling them up, to listen without trying to fix everything. Jennifer learned to be honest about her needs, to ask for help instead of trying to do everything alone, to forgive herself for past mistakes. 2 years after Jennifer had walked silently into his room that night, 2 years of treatment and fear and hoping and healing, Michael took her to the beach. It was the same beach where they had gotten engaged the first time, 15 years ago, back when they were young and stupid and thought love would be enough to overcome anything. Now they were older, maybe a little wiser. They knew love wasn't always enough. But with work, with communication, with commitment, it could be. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple. They walked along the shore, their feet in the cold water, not saying much. Just being together, enjoying the moment. Then Michael stopped walking. He turned to face Jennifer, and she looked at him with curiosity and maybe a little bit of knowing. "I want to ask you something," he said. "Okay," she replied, and she was smiling now. "We did this all wrong the first time. We rushed into marriage because we thought we were supposed to. We didn't know each other well enough. We didn't know ourselves well enough. And we hurt each other.